Less than 7 years on from paying £60 million for Oscar, and briefly making Carlos Tevez the highest paid player in world football, the Chinese Super League is on the verge of collapse. All of the league's star players have gone, salaries have been capped at a maximum of £50,000 a week, and of the league's 6 highest spending clubs, 2 have been relegated, 2 have been dissolved and no longer even exist, and only 2 remain in the top flight, which is itself barely functioning. So long, free-spending Chinese Super League, we hardly knew ya. I recently made a 38-minute documentary exploring the collapse of the Chinese Super League and the division's biggest clubs, taking a look at the economic and political headwinds that have led to China divesting from football, both at home and abroad. That was fun and all, don't get me wrong, and I would strongly recommend you all to watch it, of course, if you are curious about how the Chinese Super League's demise came about, but I also thought that it would be fun, and a little lighter perhaps, just to take a look at all of the big-name players who headed to China for massive money, and see what they're up to now that the whole thing has come crashing down. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Alright, I will start with the Chinese Super League's 7 biggest signings, that is to say, the 7 most expensive, what with this being HITC Sevens and all, followed by the next 14 most expensive, and then 7 which perhaps didn't command massive transfer fees, but were big-name players who arrived on massive salaries, taking us up to 28 players in total since all of those numbers, you may have noticed, are multiples of 7. I've been doing this for a while. Right, here we go. 7th, Yannick Carrasco, Atletico Madrid. The 7th most expensive Chinese Super League signing, Yannick Carrasco joined Dalian Professional at the end of February 2018 for a reported fee of €30 million. Carrasco had been playing for Spanish giants Atletico Madrid, who went on to win the Europa League that season for the past 2.5 years, having joined them for a fee of €20 million, and 25% of the fee that Dalian Professional paid for him went to his former club Monaco. Born in Belgium to a Spanish mother and a Portuguese father, the latter of whom left the family whilst Carrasco was still a child, Carrasco chose to represent the nation of his birth, becoming a key cog in their so-called golden generation, and having won 62 caps at the age of 29. A goal scorer in the 2016 Champions League final, which Atletico went on to lose, Carrasco joined Dalian Professional in the Chinese Super League, alongside his Atletico teammate Nicolas Gaitan, in what was a noteworthy move given that Dalian's owners, the Wanda Group, also owned 20% of Atletico Madrid at the time, and sponsored Atletico's stadium, then known as the Wanda Metropolitano. Unlike most Chinese Super League signings, Carrasco ended up being pretty decent business, scoring 24 goals in 52 games from the left flank for Dalian, before Atletico re-signed him for €27 million in January 2020. Carrasco has since won the La Liga title in Madrid, and he was linked with Manchester United in the January transfer window just gone, so it would be fair to say that his brief Chinese escapade had a minimal impact upon his overall career. 6th, Cedric Bakambu, Olympiacos. A goal-scoring machine who was linked with several Champions League teams in 2017 and 2018, 6-time Chinese champions Beijing Guoan tried to send out a message that they meant business by seeing off high-profile European competition for the signature of Cedric Bakambu. Signed for a massive €40 million fee, after Beijing Guoan triggered Bakambu's release clause, the French-born DR Congo international had scored 48 goals in 105 games for Villarreal, including 14 goals in 21 games during the season in which he left. Bakambu signed a 4-year deal with Beijing Guoan, reported to be worth €72 million, so nearly €350,000 a week. It made Bakambu one of the highest paid players in the world, and he scored 58 goals in 87 games during his almost 4 years in the Chinese capital. His contract was terminated slightly prematurely by mutual consent in November 2021, at which point Bakambu was being heavily linked with FC Barcelona, but he ended up signing for Marseille instead. now aged 31, Bakambu only managed 4 goals in 24 games at Marseille, perhaps taking a bit of time to get back up to speed with the rigours of the European game, but he has been back in business since signing for Olympiacos last summer, where he has scored 9 goals in only 16 league games to date. Bakambu might be in a better place now career-wise had he never gone to China, but given the finances involved in that deal, I doubt he loses too much sleep over that fact. 5th, Jackson Martinez, retired. Whilst Yannick Carrasco's move to China was, broadly speaking, inconsequential, and Cedric Bakambu's was disruptive but still worthwhile for him from a financial perspective, Jackson Martinez's was an outright disaster. By the end of Martinez's 3 seasons at Porto, where he scored 92 goals in 136 games, he was among the most sought-after centre-forwards on the planet. 2-footed, athletic, and aerially dominant, almost no team in the world would have turned him down in the summer of 2015, but it was Atletico Madrid who got him after meeting his €35 million release clause. Unfortunately, Martinez and Atletico didn't appear to be a match made in heaven, and after just 6 months in Madrid, where he could only manage 3 goals in 22 games, Diego Simeone's side were delighted to be able to turn a profit on him. Guangzhou Evergrande signed Martinez for €42 million in February 2016, which was a record fee for an Asian club at the time, which lasted for all of 2 days. Following just 16 games in China, Martinez suffered an ankle injury from which he would never recover. He was sidelined for 2 years and never played for Guangzhou again, the Chinese club, terminating his contract in 2018, believing that he wouldn't play again. Martinez did actually make a return, with Portimonense in Portugal, where he spent 2 seasons, but the pain was ultimately too much, and he retired from football in December 2020. 4th, Paulinho, Corinthians. One of the best players ever to have graced the Chinese game, former Brazilian international Paulinho is both the 4th and the 25th most expensive signing in the history of the Chinese Super League, having been signed twice by Guangzhou Evergrande and 3 times if you include his loan spell. The first came in June 2015, after Paulinho had flopped at Tottenham Hotspur, and Spurs became one of the few clubs to actually lose money when selling to a Chinese club, getting £9.9 million for Paulinho just 2 years after they'd forked out £17 million to sign him from Corinthians. Very Spursy. Guangzhou proceeded to turn a big profit on Paulinho, selling him to Barcelona for €14 million, a record sale for the Chinese Super League, where he had 1 excellent season before returning to China for €42 million in order to free up a non-EU player slot in the Barcelona squad. In total, Paulinho spent 6 seasons playing in the Chinese Super League, where he scored 75 goals in 176 games, playing in central midfield. Capped 56 times by Brazil, the last of which came at the 2018 World Cup, Paulinho left Guangzhou Evergrande and China for a second and a final time in June 2021, when his contract was terminated by mutual consent after the league's decline had already begun, and he subsequently joined Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia. That move lasted just 2 months and was followed by a short spell out of the game before Paulinho rejoined Corinthians a little over 12 months ago. 3rd, Alex Teixeira, Vasco da Gama. The most significant Chinese Super League signing, in my eyes at least, given that it was the one which worried European teams the most, when Alex Teixeira chose to join Jiangsu Suning in February 2016, despite having had firm offers from both Chelsea and Liverpool, there was a genuine sense of panic that the Chinese Super League could become a real problem, particularly for Premier League clubs. That would prove to be very short-lived, but back at the start of 2016, Teixeira was a superstar, having bagged 22 goals in only 15 league games so far that season for Shakhtar Donetsk. That's why interest in him was so intense, But Jiangsu Suning not only outbid Liverpool and Chelsea, they were able to convince Teixeira himself to join them ahead of two of Europe's biggest clubs. Brought to China just 2 days after Jackson Martinez, Teixeira set a new record for the league, signed for a fee of €50 million. Teixeira spent 5 seasons in China, scoring 72 goals in 150 games and winning the Chinese Super League title during his final season. Following that triumph in 2020, Teixeira left Jiangsu Suning and the club was dissolved. Following a brief and unsuccessful stint at Besiktas, Teixeira, now aged 33, rejoined his boyhood club Vasco da Gama in 2022. Second, Hulk, Atletico Mineiro. Former Brazilian international Hulk has a fierce left foot, bags of flair, and he has scored a ridiculous number of goals wherever he's played. It's just a shame that we never got to see him test himself against the very best in the business on a weekly basis in one of Europe's Big 5 leagues. Instead, Hulk left Porto in 2012, when he had plenty of offers, to sign a massive contract with Zenit in Russia, followed by his €55.8 million transfer to Shanghai SIPG, which made him one of the highest paid players on the planet. In 5 seasons in Shanghai, Hulk scored 77 goals in 145 games, rarely getting out of second gear. As the league sank, Hulk jumped ship, supposedly rejecting interest from Champions League teams in order to play in Brazil for the first time since 2004, back when he played 2 games for Vitória as an 18-year-old. Hulk joined his current club Atletico Mineiro in January 2021, where he has been outstanding ever since, as one of the brightest lights in the Brazilian game, bagging 67 goals in 115 games, playing as a centre-forward. First, Oscar, Shanghai Port. The biggest signing in the history of the Chinese Super League. I don't know if they're still keeping him around for sentimental reasons at this stage, whilst everything else crumbles, but Oscar is pretty much the only big-name player left in China, along with Marouane Fellaini. A fantastic footballer, who I always liken to a second-rate Kaká, given his speed, style and ability in transition, Oscar was a regular for Brazil and Chelsea at the age of only 21, playing 64 games in all competitions in his debut campaign at the Bridge. It took a fee variously reported as being worth somewhere between £52 and £67 million, but most likely £60 million, to get Oscar out of West London as a real marquee signing for the Chinese Super League as a whole in December 2016. It was Shanghai SIPG who got him though, handing Oscar a 4-year deal reported to be worth £400,000 a week. The move was significant because Oscar wasn't some aging has-been looking for one last payday, he had only recently turned 25. Now aged 31, Oscar has spent 6 seasons at Shanghai, now named Shanghai Port, where he has made 146 goal contributions in 175 games from attacking midfield. Oscar looked to be on the verge of signing for Flamengo in August 2022, until Shanghai Port scuppered the deal and decided to keep hold of him, leaving him trapped in what some, within the business world term, a golden cage. That concludes the Chinese Super League's 7 biggest signings, purely in terms of the transfer fees involved, but I promised you much more than that, and I would sooner gouge my own eyeballs out with a rusty teaspoon than let a single one of you down. From 7 to 14, the next most expensive Chinese Super League signings were Anthony Modeste, who joined Tianjin Quanjian from Cologne in 2017, but now plays for Borussia Dortmund, age 34, former Brazilian international Ramirez, who joined Jiangsu Suning from Chelsea but retired in 2020, following a single season back in Brazil with Palmeiras, mercurial Austrian forward Marko Arnautovic, who joined Shanghai Port from West Ham United, but now plays for Bologna, former Watford striker and Manchester United loanee Odion Ighalo, who now plays for Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia, Belgian anchor, Axel Witsel, who spent his best years in Russia and China, but now plays for Atletico Madrid at the age of 34, Napoli and Slovakia's all-time record goal scorer, Marek Hamšík, who plays for Trabzonspor these days, now aged 35, and gifted Brazilian number 10 Talisca, who has never played in a top 5 league at the age of 28, in spite of all of his talent, and now plays alongside Cristiano Ronaldo at Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia. Following on from them, some of you may recall Elka's son, named Al Kesson in China, where he spent so long that he was actually naturalised and ended up making 13 appearances for China's national team. He left China after 9 years in 2022, but is without a club after his short stint with Gremio came to an end last month. Salomon Rondon was taken to Dalian Professional by his old pal Rafa Benitez, and he has just signed for Argentine giants River Plate, having last played for Everton. Former AC Milan wonderkid Alexander Pato scored prolifically in China, but has been without a club since Orlando City decided not to extend his stay in the MLS. Former Arsenal man Gervinho spent 2 seasons in China and now plays for Aris in Greece. Stephan El Shaarawy only ever made 16 appearances in the Chinese Super League for Shanghai Shenhua and has been with Roma since 2021. One-time Southampton marksman Graziano Pella signed a staggering contract with Shandong Luneng in 2016, which was more befitting of the actual Pele, but he hasn't had a club since leaving Parma in 2021. And Demba Ba, a man who was signed twice by Shanghai Shenhua, either side of a year playing in Turkey, retired in 2021, and is now the chairman of American soccer team ASC San Diego. Those are, I can reliably inform you, the 21 most expensive Chinese Super League signings and where those players are now. In terms of 7 of the alternative biggest signings, and this is a little bit more subjective, who didn't necessarily command enormous transfer fees, but were signed on huge contracts and were viewed as being significant additions to the league, I picked out Carlos Tevez firstly, who became the highest paid player in the world briefly at Shanghai Shenhua, but treated his 9 months in China as a bit of a joke, or as a vacation as he put it, spending much of that time back in Argentina, or at Disneyland Shanghai with his family, earning himself the nickname Disney. Tevez retired in 2021, following a 3rd and final stint at Boca Juniors. Asamoah Gyan was a man who never knowingly turned down an enormous heap of cash to play for any football club, and that was the case once again in 2015 when Shanghai SIPG offered him an eye-watering, reported £227,000 a week. Gyan hasn't played football since 2021, though that didn't stop him from offering to play for Ghana at the 2022 World Cup. They said no. Argentine number 10 Dario Conca, some of you may recall, became the world's 3rd highest paid player when he first joined Guangzhou Evergrande. Now aged 39, he retired back in 2019, and retired pretty comfortably, one would imagine. Iconic Turkey striker Burak Yilmaz spent a single season in China with Beijing Guoan before returning to Europe to win a Ligue 1 title with Lille. At age 37, he is still starring in the Eredivisie for Fortuna Sittard these days. Israel's all-time leading goalscorer, Eren Zahavi, is perhaps the most prolific goalscorer in the history of the Chinese Super League, having struck 103 times in 117 games for Guangzhou R&F. Age 35, he is now back in Israel and back among the goals for Maccabi Tel Aviv. Former Everton and Manchester United midfielder, come occasional forward, Marouane Fellaini, you may recall me mentioning earlier on, is just about the only other big name remaining in the Chinese Super League along with Oscar, still contracted to Shandong Taishan. And last, but by no means least, well, actually, I did rank these ones by perceived significance, so genuinely last in all senses, if I'm being honest, is talented Colombian number 10, Juan Fernando Quintero, who was the last big name to sign for a Chinese club, joining Shenzhen in 2021, before, very quickly, returning to River Plate on loan, and still aged only 30, he just returned to Colombia in a move to Atletico Junior. Oh, actually, and I should add Tim Cahill, who is now a Qatari stooge and CSO of the Aspire Academy in Doha. There really isn't enough money in the world for some people, is there? Ezequiel Lavezzi, who never played again after leaving Hebei China Fortune as a 34-year-old in 2019, and Chelsea turned Shanghai Shenhua strike partners Didier Drogba and Nicolas Anelka, who I initially overlooked since they were signed a few years before the league really took off, and they are, as such, both long retired. I do realise that I just ruined my whole multiple of 7 thing by adding 4 random players on at the end there, but hopefully now none of you are feeling shortchanged, and my eyes will remain free of any rusty teaspoons, withered only by the much slower and gradual burnout of spending 18 hours a day making YouTube videos about football. Ah, the joys. On that note, thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. I do, of course, sincerely hope that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you're subscribed. Of course, I can't believe that anyone wouldn't be at this stage, and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on either Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens, should you wish to do so. And why wouldn't you?